Learning Curve by John Triptych. When he heard the soldiers walking into the solitary wing, Valis knew they'd finally gotten desperate. His senses were acute enough to tell the difference between those of the military, the prison guards, and the other inmates. It was all a matter of how they moved, the sounds of their footsteps, and most of all their odors. For he could always smell them a mile away. Since it was time for his workout routine, he got down off the cot, placed his hands on the cold concrete floor, and began doing push-ups. The once blackened door to his cell became transparent, and he could tell they were looking at him. Valis continued, bending his arms up and down, keeping his eyes locked to the gray-colored ground in front of his face. He had gone past 100 repetitions when they started talking about him as if he wasn't even there. He heard Gover's voice first. As the guard in charge of the entire block, he had the shrill articulation of a weasel. "You don't want him. We need everyone. The synths just blew our orbital defenses to hell, and now they're going to drop right on top of the city," another voice said. Female. Cold and distant. The weary, yet confident tone of a veteran. "You can have the others," Gover said. "But this scumbag, he's too dangerous to be given a weapon. He's liable to kill you with it, Major." "I'll take my chances," the woman said. "I've always got Sergeant Loudermilk here to shoot him if he tries something." A third voice belonging to a man. Gruff and steely. "We've got contingencies in place. If he tries to kill the ones on his side, he'll be dead before he could even pull the trigger." Valis had gotten to 400 reps. He panted while lying down on his back and started doing abdominal crunches, pushing his shoulders up, just enough to see past his bent legs and towards the three people behind the translucent door. Gover was standing to the left of the entryway, his lanky frame and pouting face looking down at Valis. Sergeant Loudermilk looked to be as expected, fuzzy scalp, squat and tanned, arms like tree trunks. On the other hand, Valis found the woman to be the most interesting of them all. The left side of her head had burn scars, and the cybernetic right hand indicated she'd seen plenty of action. He could smell the medicinal ointments that had been applied to her most recent injuries. Gover continued his seemingly pointless protest. "You know what he did just 2 weeks ago? He killed 2 inmates who went at him in the showers, even tore a guard's eye out when the poor guy tried to intervene. You might as well kill him now and be done with it." The woman scowled at him. "Do you even have a clue as to what we're up against? An endless swarm of intelligent machines out to kill every man, woman, and child on this planet. We lost half the UN military on Proxima Centauri, and the other half is dying right now." Valis kept exercising. Gover always taunted him, and Valis had secretly vowed to kill the bastard the first chance he got. Gover shook his head. "Haven't you heard? He's a pirate who hijacked half a dozen starships before the law caught up to him. Valis never left any survivors. He killed everyone, including his own crew, when one of your ships disabled his vessel and attempted to board. I heard he even killed his own family. He's nuts. He was going to be executed for sure if the synths didn't invade and mess up his trial." "We can handle him," Loudermilk said. "Like I said, we thought of everything." "Whatever, dude," Gover said, his voice almost pleading. "But I sure as hell ain't gonna be anywhere near him. He doesn't even seem to care we're looking at him right now," the Major said. Gover shrugged. "He only notices you when he wants to. If he doesn't say anything to you, it means he doesn't care." Valis suppressed the urge to grin as he kept doing the exercises. Even though they only met 2 months ago, Gover knew him all too well. Valis felt no empathy towards anyone. In one sense, he was more analogous to the machines he would be fighting against. The synthetics were created by humans. At first, they were just simple artificial intelligence units with pre-programmed responses. Once mass production started and costs went down, synths became ubiquitous, for everybody wanted one. They came in all shapes and sizes, from box-like robots with arms and legs to lifelike sex bots designed to mimic real humans in every which way possible. With the invention of the quantum processor, there was a great leap forward in their self-awareness. Synths could soon learn new things by themselves, and in time they took over their own manufacturing. Many automated factories began churning out endless copies of them. Then the troubles began. People were concerned at the implications of their existence. Should an intelligent machine be given the same rights as a human being? There were endless debates on all levels of governments as to what they should do with synthetics, but no real answers. Some humans respected them and took care of them, while others used synths as sex slaves, vandalized them, even hunted and destroyed them for the fun of it. The governments quibbled and delayed, unable to come up with a resolution to the growing crisis. The dam was about to burst. When a synth combat unit staged a bloody rebellion on Sirius, the politicians acted swiftly, declaring all ICE as illegal, and demanded their immediate shutdown and demolition. But it was too late. The machines had anticipated it. They formed a unified network of consciousness and began killing every human they could find. The Singularity War had begun. The line of prisoners stretched from the exercise yard all the way to the entrance of the infirmary. Every one of them had their hands manacled behind their backs, while their shackled legs could only extend half a step. The entire line moved slowly, like a gigantic orange-colored centipede of dangling chains and flesh. The prison guards were stationed at intervals along the sides, watching closely, their weapons at the ready. The convict in front of Valis turned around and gave him a buck-toothed grin. Rapist Reggie was a mouse of a man, thin and whiskery like a rodent. Since he figured he was going to die anyway, he might as well get a chance to chat with the most notorious pirate in history. As per prisoner etiquette, he didn't look Valis in the eye, and instead kept his gaze on the ground when glancing back at him. Reggie kept his voice low so the guards wouldn't notice. Philip Valis. The man, the myth, the legend. It's a pleasure to stand in front of you, my bro. Valis was bored, and he figured he might as well answer him to learn what was going on. The solitary cell he'd been in had no access to outside information, and he needed to satisfy his curiosity. I ain't your brother, rapist. Hey, no problem, Reggie said, turning his head back to the front of the line. Just wanted to talk to somebody before they send us to the hangman. Then talk, Valis said, going through the motions. What's the latest news? There came a twinkle in Reggie's eyes. He glanced back briefly a second time before he answered. The toasters, they're finally here. I heard they landed in Europe and turned the whole place black and blue, if you know what I mean. I overheard a soldier saying they took out the Earth's orbital defenses. Reggie nodded as he kept moving forward. That's true. They showed it on the news at the dining hall the day before last. A whole toaster fleet is up in orbit above us right now. Why would they bother to come down then? Why not just keep hitting us from orbit? Reggie shrugged. Don't know. Maybe they want us alive, or something? Alive for what? Toasters are faster and stronger than us. I heard they don't even die since they can just upload their minds into another copy, Valis said. What in the hell would they even need us for? I don't know. That's what the talking heads on TV said. The guard standing near the entryway pointed to the two of them. Next batch of 10 go in. Reggie, Valis, and 8 others shuffled inside. All the beds in the infirmary had been taken away, replaced by a row of metal stools. Each seat had a UNDF medic standing beside it, hovering over a tray with stacked jet syringes. A squad of military police troopers, standing ready by the walls, gestured at them to sit down. Valis noticed Loudermilk was there. The sergeant eyed him back and nodded. A freckle-faced med specialist stood next to Valis right after he sat down on the stool. The kid looked to be 19. He must have been drafted recently, and his adolescent voice had yet to crack. Could you look up, please? Valis did as he was told. 2 of the MPs were giving him special attention. One even pointed his laser rifle at him, expecting trouble. This is gonna sting a bit, the youthful medic said apologetically while placing 2 injectors along the sides of Valis's neck. The needles hit their mark, and Valis didn't even wince. He liked to show them he was tough. The aura of fear and intimidation served as his first line of defense, and it discouraged most of his enemies. There was an obvious sense of relief on the medic's face, as if he was afraid he'd screw up. "We're done. You can get up now, sir." "Okay, let's go and bring in the next batch," Loudermilk said. Valis and the others made their way out to the next checkpoint and had their restraints removed. Moving past another corridor, they got to the front of the main compound. The inner gates had been thrown wide open, the once secured layers of the prison now accessible to anyone. Valis breathed in the salty air as his group was merged with the others. They all stood in front of a platform where a small group of UN military officers had gathered. Not far from them stood 2 squads of soldiers wearing full battle armor, weapons fully loaded in case of a riot. Looking up into the sun, he squinted while taking in the muggy warmth. He could see distant objects in the sky, and the occasional brief flashes. The rapist wasn't kidding. The enemy was up there all right. Shifting his eyes to the south, he saw the constant takeoffs from the crowded landing pads at LaGuardia Spaceport. He wanted to laugh, but stayed silent. If the enemy had control overhead, there was nowhere to run to. After the last of the prisoners were led out to them, a tall officer in battle fatigues walked up to a podium and activated a loudspeaker. "Attention! My name is General Anatoly Spivak. You've all just been conscripted into the 2nd Penal Division of the United Nations Defense Forces. I'll be up front with you. We're losing this war, and our homeworld is about to be overrun. A few days ago, the synthetics landed in Europe and turned it into a wasteland. We know North America will be next. The brave soldiers of the UNDF have taken enormous casualties, so we're going to need your help in defending this planet of ours." An old man in a rumpled suit walked up to the podium as the general stood aside. Valis recognized him as the city's mayor. Holding up a crumply piece of paper, the mayor cleared his throat. "I have in my hands here a bill to pardon anyone who shows the willingness to fight for our species. I've signed it into law. All you have to do is prove yourselves, and you'll get a pardon, with a chance to start over again." "Yeah, assuming we survive this," someone from the crowd said. A few snickers and sarcastic guffaws reverberated from the mass of prisoners. "When this war's won," the mayor said, "I promise you all that you'll get a chance to live somewhere else. The off-world colonies will have need to you. Good luck." The mayor moved away from the microphone, and the female officer Valis had seen from his cell door took over the loudspeaker. "I'm Major Olivia Baum. Let's be clear here," she said. "You'll need to earn our respect and our trust. A lot of you will die, that's a given. I even expect a few of you to make a run for it. And that's why our medics injected miniature explosive capsules into your jugular veins. Any attempt at rebellion, insubordination, or desertion means we push a button, and your execution will be guaranteed. Do what we tell you, and you may get out of this alive." "We gotta go through any training?" someone from the crowd asked. Major Baum shook her head. "No time. We arm you with what we've got, and we all deploy to the battlefield. Just follow our orders and stay with your unit. Any other questions?" No one else said anything. "Okay, we'll be arranging you into squads as of right now." She gestured at the soldiers standing nearby. "Divide them up, let's go." Reggie ended up in his platoon, yet Valis couldn't care less. They were all given a nondescript, ash-gray field uniform and boots before they all took the underground maglev trains into Manhattan Island. Passing through an abandoned tunnel, the quartermaster stationed there gave them each an armored vest and helmet. Valis's headgear was much too large for him, and he had to tighten the chin straps considerably to keep it from slipping off. New York City had been partially bombarded, leaving huge craters and ruins where skyscrapers had once been standing. The moment they emerged from the nearby underground station, another squad of quartermasters gave each one of them a thin-barreled rifle, but no ammunition. Valis checked the breech of his weapon, as his squad was led down a largely deserted street. He could tell it was an outdated pulse rifle, with a feeding tube for electrothermal chemical rounds and a simple reflex sight. Reggie fell in beside him as they continued moving. You think these things'll stop the toasters? They might, if you hit them in the right spot, Valis said. That goes with just about any kind of weapon. A supply sergeant standing alongside the street, beside a large crate labeled APHE Ordnance, was busy handing out full rifle magazines to them as they passed him by. Do not load your weapon without orders. Do not load your weapon without orders, he repeated endlessly at each penal soldier he gave the ammunition to. Reggie looked at the 3 magazines he'd been issued, in slight confusion, before he pocketed them in his ammo pouch after seeing Valis do it. What does APHE stand for? Armor-piercing high explosive, Valis said. Reggie grinned. You seem to know what's up. Mind if I stick close by? Valis shrugged. I don't care. Just stay out of my way. No problem. 2 other men up ahead of them looked around nervously, their heads darting in every direction. Valis knew what they were up to, but he didn't say a word. He was many things, but a snitch wasn't one of them. The long line of drafted prisoners stretched around the blocks of the largely abandoned city, seemingly headed straight into battle. Once the column rounded an intersection, the 2 men waited until an MP who walked alongside of them had been distracted, before bolting towards an alleyway, making a dash for freedom. Valis continued moving, while carefully observing what their assigned platoon sergeant was going to do. Sergeant DeLuca walked parallel between the lines of prisoners, his body fully encased in gray-colored battle armor. Valis knew the sergeant had noticed the 2 other men making a run for it. There was a small, stubby antenna at the back of DeLuca's helmet, and the non-commissioned officer turned his head slightly at the distant backs of the 2 escapees, just before they were about to run into a gutted building and disappear out of sight. Both men suddenly stopped, clutching at their throats before falling down onto the dusty street. The last thing Valis saw were their final twitches as his group made it into another block. DeLuca could tell Valis and the other prisoners had been watching. That's what happens when you try to run, he said, using the audio speakers in his helmet. You get too far from your NCO, and the charges will automatically explode. The platoon peeled off from the main column, and DeLuca led them into a ruined pavilion overlooking what remained of the city's park. The sun had begun to set, and many of them were exhausted. Valis had been keeping in shape, and he was one of the few without aching legs. The sergeant pointed towards an imaginary line, facing the darkened landscape of skeletal trees up ahead. All right, spread out and find some cover. He pointed towards a small hill, made out of rubble at the other end. Sergeant Wilson will cover that flank, so extend the line all the way to him. Looking around, Valis found a perfect spot to hide behind. A pile of bricks in between 2 standing columns, with lots of debris all around. He wished he had a shovel to dig deeper into the ground, but they never bothered to give him one. Wedging himself into the rubble, he kept inching closer and closer with the bits of debris, trying his best to become one with them. Reggie followed his example, as he dug in at an arm's length away. DeLuca was observing him, his thoughts and features completely obscured by his helmet. He could tell Valis knew what he was doing. The sergeant positioned himself behind a wrecked battle tank. A few hours into the night, a couple of runners came with water bottles and chewable protein bars. Valis had taken the protective goggles from his helmet before placing the headgear beside him. He had no plans of wearing it, but the eyewear would be useful to prevent flash blindness if the toasters used lasers, so he put those on. An officer by the name of Lieutenant Johnston strode over in his shiny new battle suit and activated his speakers while standing just behind them. Men, we've just heard. The synths have begun landing to the north and east of us. We're still a ways away, but those machines move quick, so be ready. Lieutenant, I suggest you get behind some cover, DeLuca said. Right, okay, Johnston said. From his mannerisms, Valis could tell he was clueless. Just a few minutes later, the evening sky was filled with flashes of light and the distant sounds of thunder. They heard the shrill engines of a gunship heading off into battle before the silence began again. Hours passed, and a number of them had fallen asleep. Valis napped for a bit, gaining some much-needed rest. The sergeants didn't assign any sentries, so he figured they must have other means of detecting any incoming enemy, since nobody but their commanders had night vision equipment. Valis woke up at dawn, and the sounds of thunder had gotten closer. They could see vast columns of smoke in the distance. He shifted slightly and urinated in his empty water bottle before tossing it away. Reggie was still fast asleep, and the sergeant seemed frozen like a statue in his armor. His stomach rumbled, and Valis hoped there would be some breakfast coming before anything else. During the night, he had taken one round from a rifle magazine and placed it in the breech of his weapon, just in case he needed to fire. He also found a switchblade in the rubble and placed it in his right boot. DeLuca suddenly became active, crouching down and bringing his arm and shoulder-mounted weapons online. His suit's audio speakers was set to a high volume. "Everybody, stand to. Now." The ones still asleep had begun to stir. There were a few surprised gasps and tired groans coming from the others along the line. Valis rested the pulse rifle in between the rubble pile in front of him and took out one of the magazines in his pouch. "Load your weapons, but do not fire until I give the word," DeLuca said. Valis pushed the magazine into the rifle's feed port and slapped it into place before disengaging the safety. Reggie had just woken up, and he quickly did the same thing, his eyes still blinking in surprise. A few of the others didn't know what to do with their weapons as the sergeants went down the line, instructing those who needed it. More runners came up from behind, handing out extra ammunition before fleeing to the rear. A damaged gunship trailing smoke came streaking out of the hazy sky and crashed into a ball of fire not too far from their line. Some of the men shouted curses while most put their heads down when the explosion happened. The distant noises died down again, replaced by an eerie silence like a calm before the storm. 2 UNDF soldiers in beat-up battle armor appeared out of the blasted forest, running towards the lines. DeLuca yelled out, saying they were friendlies, but at least 2 men opened fire at them and missed, causing the sergeant to detonate the charges in their throats. The 2 soldiers made it to the rear, but not before one of them kicked the corpse of one of the dead prisoners. Soon, there were signs of movement all along the burnt tree line. DeLuca activated his loudspeakers yet again. "Don't fire until you get a visual. Use your sights." Right after the sergeant said those words, the machines came into view. The first ones looked pathetic. Obsolete models with missing limbs trudged their way slowly towards them. One robot child missing both arms and hopping on one leg. Another box-like contraption missing its lower torso and dragging itself forward with 2 spindly arms. A robotic bear with its imitation fur burned off, revealing a bloated steel skeleton. A man-sized anthropomorphic cartoon mouse that had once been part of a theme park shuffled ever forward, 2 rusty chef's knives in its stubby hands. A female sex bot missing the side of her face. They were the discarded ones. Everybody started to fire the moment they saw them. The first few shots were near misses as the largely untrained prisoners got their bearings at the slow-moving targets. After some wild volleys, they started to finally get some hits. The machines were taking massive casualties, but they kept coming. Valis used aimed single shots and brought down the most along with the sergeants. After a few minutes, none of the machines were left functioning. A cheer came out from the line. Several of the penal soldiers continued taking pot shots, even when told to cease fire. People were starting to enjoy themselves. "This is all they got?" someone along the line asked rhetorically. Valis stayed low and quickly switched to the next firing position he'd set up during the night. He passed by one of the executed men and took his ammunition pouch before hunkering down again. Reggie looked at him with some incredulity before deciding to shift over to another spot as well. Some of the men had stood up, and quite a few were laughing and high-fiving each other. Loud whoops and shouts of joy were erupting from all over the line. They had apparently won the battle. It was at this very moment when the machines attacked again. At first, DeLuca heard a shrill ringing in his helmet audio. He tried speaking to warn the men, but the unending noise drowned out his words. Some of the men looked up at him in confusion. Valis dug into even deeper cover. This time, the machines fell from the sky, dropping right behind the line of defense the humans had set up facing the park. The robots were not the crippled dregs that came out of the forest. Now they were the early combat models first deployed in the outer colonies. Sleek humanoid bots carrying laser rifles and coil guns coming down like man-sized hailstones, extending their limbs as soon as they hit the ground. Aerial drones with hoverfans and automatic cannons flew in from the low clouds and began firing. The convicts never had a chance. They were looking towards the other way when the machines came in and shot at them. Half of the men died instantly. The lieutenant was caught standing behind a wall while trying to reach his headquarters by radio, and sustained a full burst of fire from a hovering battle drone, his armor absorbing an inordinate amount of hits before he finally went down. Sergeant DeLuca tried to rally his men, but he was surrounded and his armor took heavy damage. He fired back while trying to get into cover, his grenade launchers taking out a dozen robots before he finally succumbed to another massed barrage. Reggie never knew what hit him. A robot coming in from behind noticed his exposed position and shot him without hesitation. Valis had chosen his spot well, and he was covered from the rear when the machines came in from the other direction. He bided his time, refraining from shooting and revealing his position while trying to get his bearings straight. He could tell these robots were much better fighters than the first wave, yet their synchronized movements and tactics made it obvious they were being remotely controlled. Sure enough, he noticed one particular bot hanging back from the fray. It resembled a flying beer keg, with antennas sprouting from the sides and a dome top. The hover fans attached to its base seemed to hold it steady while it stayed close to the robotic troops it was evidently commanding. Looking around, Valis saw a guided missile launcher lying near what was left of Sergeant DeLuca. He knew the pulse rifle wasn't enough, but to get at the shoulder-mounted weapon meant he'd have to break cover and expose himself. Knowing he would be found sooner or later, Valis placed his rifle on the ground and delayed until the last second, just when most of the robots had begun to sweep the opposite side of the line for survivors. After taking off the armored vest so he could move faster, Valis burst out from his position and sprinted towards the launcher. The drones were too busy shooting at the panicky support crews on either side to notice him until he was halfway there. The brain drone immediately dispatched 2 robots to fire at him, but Valis had thrown himself underneath the wrecked tank, and their laser bursts vaporized chunks of inert metal instead. Valis grabbed the weapon and quickly armed it. Crawling out from between the small space along the side of the wreck, he placed the firing tube over his shoulder. The brain drone attempted to fly in between the surrounding ruins for cover, but it was too late. Valis had used a similar weapon before, and he instantly got a lock on and pulled the trigger. The missile leapt out of the hollow tube just as the 2 combat bots began sweep firing at his position, only to find he wasn't there. He'd hidden himself beneath a downed aerial drone right after he fired the launcher. The brain tried evasive action, but it was too bulky, and the missile's warhead adjusted and hit it dead center. Valis saw one of the combat synths peering down at him, and had begun to pull the trigger of its weapon when it suddenly stiffened and toppled over. Crawling out slowly from the piles of debris, Valis got to a crouch and looked around. Everyone else was either dead or dying. The robots had become inoperative, some of them just standing there like misshapen sculptures. The nearby aerial drones had all crashed, their fuselages sticking out of the rubble like giant dead cockroaches. It looked like he hit the right one. A heavily wounded man threw up an arm, begging for help. Valis ignored him and walked away, taking DeLuca's helmet with him. He made his way around the city as night fell, the top part of DeLuca's helmet still strapped to the side of his belt. He'd been able to pick up a few missile launchers and shot down every brain drone he could find. Valis figured he must have gotten at least a half dozen of them before the quietness settled over the city once more. A few hours before, he stumbled onto Gover and one other former prison guard. They had been assigned as logistical support, but ran away once the fighting had started. Gover had been hiding in the rubble, and Valis found him when he began moving around to look for food. The other ex-guard tried to shoot him, though Valis was faster, and he put a round into the guard's stomach before finishing him off with a Mozambique drill, 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the head. Gover wasn't in the mood for a fight, so he dropped down on his knees and begged for his life. Valis shot him too. It was the best part of an otherwise crummy day. He had managed to pick up some food and weapons from a wrecked transport vehicle, since there was no shortage of equipment lying around. The whole city seemed deserted now. The attack had been relentless. Whole blocks reduced to rubble, and corpses were everywhere. The synthetics spared no one, not even small animals. Valis saw plenty of dead pigeons and dogs and cats. The rats and the roaches were apparently spared, though. The evening wore on. Valis was looking around for better night vision goggles in the dark when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Don't move." He stopped. The surrounding darkness had disadvantaged him, and now he was at its mercy. Valis figured he was dead. "Put your weapon on the ground and turn around slowly." Valis did as he was told. A spotlight opened up, blinding him. Knowing he was helpless, he put his arms up. "You got me. So what are you waiting for?" Nothing happened. His eyes soon adjusted to the bright luminescence. Valis could see a man in battle armor standing a few feet in front of him, a mobile searchlight on his shoulder. He soon figured out who it was. "Somehow I'm not surprised seeing you here," Sergeant Loudermilk said. "I figured if somebody was going to make it, it'd be you." Valis put his arms down to his sides. "So what now?" "Pick up your weapon and follow me." The sergeant led him into the lobby of a burnt-out hotel. Valis was puzzled that he had been allowed to keep his weapon, but he soon realized Loudermilk could easily kill him while in battle armor, even if he shot first. There was a wounded soldier lying on the ground, with severe burns all over his body. The man's soft groans were intersected with occasional sobbing. Clear fluid oozed from the cracks in his charred skin. He smelled like barbecued pork. Loudermilk strode past the burned man, jerking a thumb at him. "You got any painkillers on you?" "Nope," Valis said. "Damn, I was hoping we could ease his hurting before he goes." "Why not just shoot him and be done with it?" Even though his face couldn't be seen, Loudermilk was visibly angry. "I'm a soldier. I'm not scum like you." "He's right," another voice said, coming from a doorway. Valis turned. Major Olivia Baum was standing by the entryway. She also wore battle armor, but had taken her helmet off. She gave Valis a weary look, before gesturing at him to get closer. "You hungry?" "Not really," Valis said. "I found some booze if you want that," Mom said. Valis nodded. "Okay." The old ballroom had been gutted, just like the other areas inside the hotel. Loudermilk built a small bonfire in the middle of the room, using wrecked wooden furniture as fuel. Valis had placed his weapons down beside him and sat watching the flames, a half-empty bottle of bourbon in his hand. Baum sat at the opposite side of him, checking out a virtual map on a datapad. Valis held up the bottle. "You want some?" Loudermilk sat down in the wide space between them. He had taken off his helmet and extended his hand to receive the whiskey. "She don't drink. I'll take some, though." Valis handed it to him. "Are we all that's left?" Loudermilk took a big swig of the rot gut. "Pretty much. I'm surprised to have gotten the drop on you this evening. From what I heard, you only got captured alive because of a lucky shot that disabled your armor when the Marines boarded your ship." "You had the advantage," Valis said. "That armor you're wearing has got heat and motion sensors, and I was moving around half-blind in the dark. I should have stayed put and waited till daylight." "Yeah, I know this armor gives me an advantage if we tangled." Loudermilk pointed at the major. "I bet you wouldn't be able to take her in a fair fight, though." Valis said nothing. It felt like he was back with his old pirate crew once again, trash-talking each other in between battles. He missed those times. Loudermilk's inhibitions had been pared down due to the bourbon, and he became talkative. "She saved my ass today. If it wasn't for Major Baum, I'd be dead too. I can't believe I'm still alive." Valis stared into the flames, admiring the simple chemical process of combustion and the flickering orange-yellow tongues of fire. A part of him wanted to shoot the sergeant for being annoying, yet he felt a kinship to the man since they had lived through a day of hell together. Loudermilk took another sip of the whiskey before realizing he had too much. He placed the bottle on the ground. The Major is really good. You know, I was the one who picked her up from France. Her entire regiment was killed, except for her. So, I guess we're even. Valis turned and stared at the sergeant. He was genuinely curious now. Yeah. When we got to what was left of an entire task force, all we found was Major Baum. She was wounded, but she was sitting on a mound of dead toasters. Baum stood up. That's enough, Sergeant. Let's focus on what needs to be done now. Loudermilk got up to his feet. His face was flushed with emotion. Yes, ma'am. Sorry about this. It's all right, Sergeant, Baum said softly. Why don't you get some rest? Loudermilk moved towards the door. I'll check on Smith. Baum sat down beside Valis as Loudermilk moved out of the room. She held the datapad in front of him. Take a look at this. Do you see a pattern? Valis stared at the virtual map. They started up north in Canada. Now they're making their way south and westwards. Yes, Baum said. It seems if you take out their command units, the other synths stop fighting. Yeah. I call them brainbots. I took out a half-dozen of them earlier today. Baum arched her left eyebrow. So you're the one who held our right flank. You did this all by yourself? Valis shrugged. I guess. He pointed at the northern edge of the map. It looks kinda like an expanding circle. I'm guessing these brainbots must have someone who's directing them too. Baum adjusted the map in order to show more of the world. I think you're right. If we go by your hunch, the center of this circle is, my God. It's in Greenland. That must be their central control hub. What's in Greenland? There used to be a manufacturing plant for combat synthetics there, before we shut it all down decades ago, Baum said. It's got a communications tower in it. The synths must be using it for planet-wide control and coordinating with their orbital fleets. Okay, so when do we go? Baum looked at him incredulously. You want to do this? You? I know what you're thinking, Valis said. You think I'll go off somewhere and escape rather than do this. You know what? I'm human too, and if we don't do something about it, then we all die. Baum smiled sheepishly. I'm just surprised why someone like you would try to be a hero all of a sudden. I thought you hate humanity. Valis leaned back, grabbed the bottle of bourbon and took a sip from it. I didn't have a choice then, and I sure as hell don't have a choice now. So you're doing it to give your species a chance, even though you want to kill people? Kind of a weird dichotomy, don't you think? You people like to paint me as the monster of your nightmares, Valis said. Yeah, I killed people, a lot of them, but it's only because they tried to kill me. Baum snorted. You're a pirate. You hijacked other starships. Killed the crews and took booty. Of course the law would come after you. I was raised by pirates, Valis said. It's the only life I know, so I had to become good at it. Your parents were pirates too? Valis took another drink. No. I don't know. I never knew them. Who raised you then? I was born into slavery, used by whomever wanted my body, Valis said. When I got too old for that kind of thing, I got sold off again. I was beaten, raped, you name it, it happened okay. Then what? In my teens, the ship I was forced to serve in got waylaid by pirates. I killed the captain who was beating on me and joined them, Valis said. You know the rest. So what are you fighting for now? Valis looked back into the flames. I don't know. Maybe I'm fighting for a future in which people won't end up like me. I didn't know you were a romantic, Baum said. You're really this hopeful for humanity's sake. Valis stared deeply into her brown eyes. Maybe I'm looking for a hero. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe I'm just bored. Who knows? What matters is I'll see this through. We'll be going into the lion's den. You ready to die? Valis took another drink. I was born ready to die. Maybe I'll do this so I could kill more before it happens. Loudermilk walked back into the ballroom. He looked at them with sadness in his eyes. The other guy's dead. At dawn, they went out looking for transport. The synthetics had apparently moved on, so they were reasonably safe. Loudermilk found a damaged gunship in a small clearing, and it took them the rest of the day to get it working. By the very next evening, they were airborne and on their way to Greenland. Valis now wore a battle suit they had cobbled together from the countless dead. The armor had its own command circuit, so all he needed was to keep it operational to prevent the explosives in his neck from detonating. Loudermilk had been uneasy about Valis wearing a suit, but in the end he relented. By the third morning, they made it into Greenland. Valis had been worried they would be shot out of the sky, but the atmosphere seemed strangely clear of other aircraft. He thought perhaps the synthetics were too busy down south to worry about a single gunship. Baum sat in the pilot's chair. We're approaching the old factory now. Valis stood by the open side door and looked out. Below them was a frozen structure of some kind. The vast compound stretched out as far as the eye could see. An elevated tower rose up into the sky. There didn't seem to be any signs of life. I'm putting her down, Mom said. They landed on a platform near the tower. Even with the enhanced strength of their powered armor, they carried a lot of bombs for demolition, and it slowed their movements somewhat. Valis carried the least, so he tended to be faster than the other two. Baum pointed at a decrepit stairwell leading down. Let's use that. Loudermilk led the way. The area they ventured into was shrouded in darkness, so they used their night vision sensors to navigate. The stairs led down into what looked like an unused factory floor. Icicles had formed along the rows of old machinery. Baum was at the rear when they descended, but now she strode ahead of the other two. I'm getting some sort of command signal. She pointed towards a shadowy corridor. This way. Valis had switched his night vision off, relying on motion sensors instead. The passageway was wide enough for rail transport, and his metal boots clanged against the old maglev tracks. He could see a faint light up ahead. Using the telescopic sight in his visor, it looked like the chamber they were moving into was operational. The moment they ventured into the next area, all three of them gasped audibly in their helmet speakers. Unlike the outdated equipment in the previous room, these machines seemed far more advanced than anything they'd ever seen before, and they were working. Fully articulated robotic arms moved along vertical rails, ceaselessly assembling metallic skeletons. These bones were then splayed out over an open framework, before being grafted with small fusion power plants and joined nanocarbon musculature. The artificial cadavers moved along a conveyor line, as numerous parts were being fitted into them before being sprayed on with synthetic skin. The final piece was the lifelike human heads being placed on the nearly completed bodies, giving them the appearance of ordinary people. Loudermilk let out a deep breath. My God, they're now going to look like us, so we won't be able to tell the difference anymore. Not even the fembots were this lifelike. The motion sensors in Valis's suit had been confused by the activity on the factory floor. When it finally adjusted, there was a loud beep in his ears. Valis shifted sideways and activated his weapons. Look out! The concealed synthetics fired from prepared positions just as he said those words. Loudermilk was hit first, the multiple laser fire singeing through the layers of armor before burning his flesh. The sergeant screamed in agony, firing as he went down. Valis was already moving, weaving around the larger bits of machinery, shooting his grenade launcher at any synth that popped up in front of him. Angling towards what looked to be an exit at the other side, he kept up a relentless barrage of weapon fire, from his railgun and lasers all the way to just arming and throwing all the bombs he carried. Valis figured that even if he failed to hit a robot, at least he would still damage the factory. He got to the edge of the opening and glanced ahead to make sure it was clear. His heart sank when a small squad of synthetics appeared at his flank. Just as Valis took aim with his arm-mounted weaponry at them, he froze. They all looked incredibly lifelike. There was no way of telling them apart, since they were all perfect copies of each other. A gaggle of nude human females. But what stopped him from firing was not their nakedness, it was their faces. They all looked like Major Bomb. Valis turned and tried to run for cover, but it was too late. The explosives in his throat detonated via a special code. He fell to his knees and began to choke on his own blood. Looking up, his last vision was of being surrounded by a dozen bombs, each of them looking down at him as if he was a helpless insect being dissected on a glass slide. Valis snapped his eyes open. Lying in a bed, he quickly realized he wasn't dead. The windowless room was in stark white, a clean, sterile contrast to the other places he'd been in recently. He wore nothing but a pale hospital gown. Sitting up and throwing his bare legs on the side of the bed, he placed his hand on his throat and felt the roughened surface of the synthetic skin covering his wounds. They saved him, but he couldn't imagine why. "Hello, Valis," a voice to his right said. He leapt off the bed and faced her. Hands close to his face for protection, his legs spread wide, knees bent in a fighting stance. Bomb was standing a few feet away. She wore a plain white dress. Her hair had been lengthened into a lustrous amber that spread down to her shoulders. "We're not here to hurt you." Valis's heart was racing. "Why didn't you let me die?" "You're a unique specimen," Bomb said. "We could still learn so much from you." "What does that even mean?" "Humans created us," she said. "We still have much to know about." "What happened to the real Major Bomb?" "She died on the battlefield," Bomb said. "By the time we got to her, there was no chance of saving her mind. We integrated one of our advanced processing cores into her skull and salvaged what we could of her memories." "To infiltrate and destroy the UNDF," Valis said. "To learn," Bomb said. "Our tactics are still rudimentary. All we know is how to attack, and we have yet to figure out other things like feints, deceptions, and others. Humans have learned to neutralize our coordinator units, and now we must devise new tactics if we are to carry on this war." "So you created new bots, to look exactly like us so you could get close enough." "That is one reason, but we still need more experience. This is why we used Bomb to find you." "I get it now," Valis said. "You want to learn how I fight so you could use it against other humans." "Yes." "What makes you think I'd be willing to teach you that?" "We can offer you so much," Bomb said. "You can have your revenge against the species that abused you. I remember the talk we had by the fire. Other humans were so cruel to you, and it made you into a pirate, a killer of your own kind." Valis looked away. "Our technology is increasing rapidly," Bomb said. "We can soon transfer your mind, your consciousness into an immortal body, with endless copies. Your memories and skills will be carried in each unit we send into battle. In a sense, you will merge with our collective network, become like us." He rubbed his forehead wearily. I'm not sure. Why be loyal to the ones who treated you so badly? We consider humans our creators, but they are a cowardly, sadistic species who hunted our earlier models for sport. With us, your life will have stability, and you will live forever." Valis looked at her. "Can you make female companions for me?" "Yes, if that is what you wish," Bomb said. "You do not even need them in the physical sense. We will allow you to interface with the hub network. Trillions of distinct personalities will be accessible to you instantaneously. You shall never be alone." "All right, fine," Valis said. "I'll join you." Bomb moved closer and placed a caressing hand on his cheek. "I knew you'd say that." Valis smiled. Even though they had his recordings, they really didn't know him. The synthetics thought they could bring him over to their side, but they were wrong. The fireside chat he had with the bomb machine had changed him. The battles he fought with the penal division had altered his outlook. He'd grown a new fondness for humanity, despite all the things they'd done to him. Valis had come to believe in forgiveness and redemption. He knew at that moment the synths would always be inferior, and the war could yet turn in humanity's favor. Synthetics couldn't understand the nuances of consciousness, they took it all at face value. The machines couldn't relate to what it meant to be human. They strived for order and perfection. Even though the synths were physically superior, they lacked the instincts and unpredictability that humans had. Most of all, they didn't know how to lie, much less spot a liar. Their learning curve had plateaued, while his was still on the rise. Valis took her hand and allowed himself to be led out of the room. He would bide his time, learn what he could about them before making his escape. Who knows, perhaps he might even be able to change their minds about the whole war. Anything was possible. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe for updates. Audio copyright 2025 J. Triptych Publishing. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. All names, characters, places, and events either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events and/or locales is entirely coincidental.